The Tar Heels are in the final 7 for the best high school player on the planet, AJ Dybantsa. But are they a real threat to land him?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Friday, August 9th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank you for making us your first listen or watch, and a special shout out goes out to all the everydayers joining us and all the great members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community. Welcome in, everybody. Glad you're here. This episode's brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. In the dog days of summer, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up every customer with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Going to be a fun show today to wrap up the week here on Locked On Tar Heels. We're going to start by talking a little bit of AJ Dybantsa. Had a great question about hey, are the Tar Heels a legit threat to land this kid or not? So we'll get into that. And then had another great question about RJ Davis's usage, basically hey, is it a better thing for Carolina if he's not the National Player of the Year? An interesting question to dive into. We're going to look a little bit at where the Tar Heels might land in the ACC standings. And Drake May got some snaps on Thursday night. And I do mean some. All that coming up today on the show. Let's get into it. AJ Dybantsa had a question on email from our guy, Hal Easter. Hal connects with me quite a bit. Hal, thanks for this question. By the way, if you want to email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Would love to chat with you there. And Hal says this: Isaac, do you think it is realistic for UNC to get AJ Dybantsa? And he actually says, instead of Nate Ament plus a 2-guard plus a 4. Seems like the dominoes do not line up well for getting 3 top players in the 2025 class, plus a 5 and a 1. Your take. Look, this, Hal and everyone, let's just start before we get to the AJ Dybantsa of it all, because that's where I really want to take this conversation. It is going to be such a crapshoot, not just in 2025, but forevermore, while the lay of the land is what it is, because these rosters are in such flux all the time now that if I'm a high school recruit, I'm waiting as long as I can till I see who's transferring where, what holes are open, roster holes are open, I guess I should say, and where I could go and get time and develop and all of that kind of stuff. That was different with an AJ Dybantsa, who is plug and play from day one. He is that good. Y'all, I'm dead serious. If you haven't seen this kid play, you got to go. Don't just go watch highlights. Watch a game. Watch all the ways he affects this thing on both sides of the floor. I mean, it's insane how good he is. Truly, right now, the best player in high school, regardless of class. And that's with all due respect to Cam Boozer, who's incredible. How to directly answer your question, I don't know how realistic it is to get Dybantsa and, multiple other elite level players in the class of 25. Maybe 2, Dybantsa and maybe 1 other. Of course, there's always the hey, if you get Dybantsa, that might entice some others to come play along with him. So there is that. But I want to talk specifically about Dybantsa, because Carolina has made it into his top 7. And I know sometimes that doesn't really matter. In this case, I think it does, and I'd like to tell you why. Carolina's in the mix, and Kansas is in the mix. That's it in terms of blue bloodery. Because what's interesting to me is that when you look at this top 7 list, noticeably absent our neighbors in Durham, Kentucky, or Arkansas for that matter, if you're thinking just John Calipari at a big general level, and UConn. And so multiple of these other high-level players, particularly Duke and Kentucky, when you think, top 1, 2, 3, 4 players in each class. Those schools are not on his list. Now, there's nothing that beholds him to this list, right? He could come out tomorrow and say, actually, forget those 7. I'm narrowing it down to these 3 other schools. He could totally do that, and it's well within his rights. He doesn't seem like the type of kid, and he's not part of the type of family that seems like that's what they would do. I have no reason to think that it won't legitimately be from what Dybantsa has rolled out as his top 7. So in addition to Carolina and Kansas, of course, you know who's in there because we're seemingly going head-to-head all the time now. Alabama. So that's another part of this top 7. The other 4 schools for Dybantsa are Kansas State, Baylor, Auburn, and BYU, who, by the way, if you haven't heard, BYU actually has the most noise right now. Several reasons for that. Number one, Dybantsa is transferring to Utah Prep this season. He's played, out at Prolific Prep on the West Coast. He's from Massachusetts. So, I mean, there's no telling geographically. Dybantsa's geographical playing is kind of like conferences named after geography. It just doesn't matter in a little nod to whose line is it anyway. So I wouldn't read too terribly much into that, but it's not a thing. He's playing in Utah. There's BYU. Also, BYU, if you're not aware, their head coach, Mark Pope, went to Kentucky to replace Coach Cal, and they hired one of the Suns assistant coaches, Phoenix Suns assistant coaches, Kevin Young, who had been, in the game for multiple head coaching opportunities in the NBA. And so there is that pedigree with Kevin Young and BYU. That's a thing. And then keep in mind that BYU is not in the West Coast Conference anymore. They're a Big 12 school now. And so that brings a new level of cachet. So don't just laugh off BYU as like, oh, that's cute. How long can they hang in this race before they bow out? It's a legitimate option in this day and age. And I know that seems weird, but there's money there as well. So keep that in mind. But to answer Hal's question in terms of, is it realistic that Carolina, I'm not going to mess anymore with, landing the others. Just, is it realistic that Carolina could get AJ Dybantsa? Yes. To me, they're in that top 7 mix. And again, in this case, that matters. And I know there are going to be some that will say something to this effect. Oh, AJ is just putting Carolina in his top 7 for the prestige of it. So he can say, oh yeah, I've got Carolina, I've got Kansas in my top 7. If it was just about the prestige, why aren't Duke and Kentucky on this list, who, are year after year after year landing target number 1 in each class? This isn't about prestige. These are a legit 7 schools. So to me, that says that Carolina has a legit shot. As you'll remember, AJ Dybantsa said that it's mostly been his dad to this point. He's just now starting post Peach Jam to get into conversing with some of these coaches, thinking more about it. And so legitimately any team on this list is part of it. If BYU does have the lead, one of the things we start thinking about is shoe contracts. BYU is a Nike school. AJ Dybantsa plays on the EYBL circuit, so that matches up. Now, that's not necessarily always the thing that matters anymore. For example, Ian Jackson has an Adidas NIL deal. We're a Jumpman school. We're a Nike school. Whatever. Because another part of it is he kind of feels like the kind of kid to me that would end up at a Kansas. Just feels that way. And I know, again, he's Nike. Kansas is Adidas. In this day and age, I don't know that it necessarily matters all that much. You look at a Baylor. Baylor's landed multiple high-level elite prospects in recent years, like VJ Edgecombe, who's coming this year, right? Scott Drew sticking around in Waco helps that continuity. Obviously, Nate Oates in Alabama are a threat. Obviously, his counterpart in the state of Alabama, Bruce Pearl at Auburn, is a threat. They have a lot of high-level guys. So, in terms of how realistic is it to get AJ Dybantsa, here's where things are at right now. You just got to work to land an official visit. And keep in mind, official visits are unlimited. You're not, held to just 5 anymore. So it's not like, all right, he's got a list of 7, but he can only go see 5. No, he can go see them all. He's already taken an official to Auburn. He's gone unofficial to BYU, but he's going to go there on an official. And there's nothing that seems to suggest like he won't come check out Carolina. honestly, I think he will probably check out all 7 schools. And, like you've heard Armando Bacot say it, don't come to Chapel Hill unless you are planning to commit, because it's going to be hard to leave and not commit. Another thing is that, you worry, oh boy, top talent in the class. Is he going to go to college, or is he going to go do OTE for a year or something like that? He has held firm to the commitment that he is going to college for his freshman year, and then he will be off to the NBA. I mean, he's that good. It's almost a no-brainer. So as of now, Hal and others who are interested, yeah, Carolina's in the mix for AJ Dybantsa as much as anybody else. There is no like out there public crazy good intel that BYU is, he's not come out and said, yeah, I've got a list of 7, but BYU's my true front runner. There's nothing of that. So get in the mix, get that NIL bag going, because you got to be in that game. That's just part of the deal of the landscape of college basketball or college athletics in general right now. So you got to be ready with that money. So UNC's NIL has to come through on that. Now, enough projecting ahead to the next class, the 2025 class. Let's talk about right now. How much RJ Davis usage is too much RJ Davis usage this upcoming season? We'll answer that question coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. I love sports, man, and I never want them to stop. I know we're coming to the end of the Olympics here. I am bummed about that, but boy, does America have a crazy medal lead. Y'all see Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone last night? She is insane. I absolutely love it. But after that's over, we get fewer games. We're going to be down to just baseball for a couple of weeks, but football's almost here, and then basketball is just around the corner. It's going to be great. But in the meantime, FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you got to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And as a reminder, this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. We're about to talk RJ Davis. How about some Wooden Award odds for the upcoming season? Right now, Hunter Dickinson leads the way at plus 550 odds. RJ Davis and, oddly enough, Mark Sears are tied for the second best odds at plus 600. And as a big old drop-off, you know who's tied for 4th? Some dude named Caleb Love and Auburn's Janai Broome at plus 1,500, and then it goes on from there. So if you want to get in on that action, head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. I just gave you some Wooden Award odds for National Player of the Year this upcoming college basketball season. Apropos, because I want to share with you another listener question. This one comes from Drew Williamson on through email. Again, reminder, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. And Drew, thank you for the question. Hal, thank you for yours, by the way. Drew says, do we really want RJ to win National Player of the Year award? No, hear me out. If RJ doesn't win NPOY, National Player of the Year, it may indicate that the pieces that we've placed around him reduces his individual performance, but indicates an improved team success overall. Is there a world in the offseason conversations in which we hope RJ doesn't win National Player of the Year? Thank you, Drew, for that question. It's a really intriguing one. It's similar to what we're thinking about this year with football. Like, can the Carolina football team actually be better as a unit without Drake May, without reliance so heavily on Drake May? It's a similar question with RJ Davis. And Drew, what's interesting is my gut reaction to your question was to say, yeah, that's very accurate. Like RJ Davis not winning National Player of the Year award because he has less usage, like playing fewer minutes a game, using fewer possessions of the team, allowing other guys to cook around him as well, is ultimately better for the team because then his, maybe his body doesn't break down as much, all these other things. And so, yeah, my gut reaction is I think that is accurate, that him not being a National Player of the Year conversation could be better for the team. Hear me, though, say that was my gut reaction. Because then I was like, let me dive into some numbers, start thinking more about this, look at some other historically great Carolina teams, see the usage for the best player on the team, how that translated. Let me look at some other recent National Player of the Years what their usage was and how that played out. So let me give you some numbers, Drew and others, to help put this together. Let me give you RJ's usage percentage each of his 4 years of college so far. And whatever you're thinking is probably accurate. Yes, there was a massive uptick last season. Freshman year, 22% usage rate. Sophomore year, 20.5% usage rate. That's the national runner-up season. Junior year, 22.9% usage rate. And then last year, spiked out at 27.7% usage rate for RJ Davis. You're probably not shocked to hear that number, right? When you think about it. And so I started to think, boy, that 27.7 is a high number. Got to get that down. Got to get that back like under 25%. That's probably using RJ too much. So I thought, you know what? Let me go back and look like at Tyler Hansbrough. How much did Carolina rely on him, say, his junior year when he won National Player of the Year, which is germane to this conversation, and then his senior year where he had a great year, didn't win National Player of the Year. That was Blake Griffin, but Carolina won the national championship. Let me give you T. Hans's usage rate. His freshman year, you remember everyone had left after the 05 championship. Tyler comes in and Carolina basically relies on him. 26.9% usage rate that year. Sports Reference didn't have anything for Tyler's sophomore year, so I don't have that for you. But his junior year, the year he won National Player of the Year, his usage rate was 27.3%. So just 0.4% lower than RJ's was last year. And so my hypothesis as I got ready to look at the 08-09 season was that Tyler's usage rate would probably go down a little bit as like Ty Lawson, Wayne Ellington, Danny Green, Deion Thompson's, Tyler Zeller's all went up. But how about this? Minimally so, but Tyler Hansbrough's usage rate actually went up his senior year from 27.3% to 27.4%. Almost saying maybe there's not as much correlation as I initially thought there was. How about recent usage rate on other recent big-time Tar Heel teams? 2011-2012 team, right? The team that probably at least goes to the national championship game if Kendall Marshall doesn't break his wrist. Harrison Barnes, 28.1% usage on that team. Tyler Zeller, 24.5%. The 16-17 national championship team, 25.7% for Justin Jackson. That was the highest. 2018-19, that team, you know, is like Kobe, Luke May, that Nasir, all that. Kobe, 26.8% usage. Interestingly, the highest of the rest of the contributors was Nasir Little at 25.2%. So all this to say, my ideal for RJ as I start thinking about it for this upcoming season is that there has to be this balance of leaning heavily on your best player, right? You don't want to limit how much of an impact he can have for your team, while at the same time, you don't want to overuse him in a way that breaks down his body. Although that said, I'm knocking on wood as I say this, RJ Davis has never missed a game in his college career. Never. Now, I'm not jinxing him because I've said that in other off seasons. People have yelled at me and it's always been fine. So look, if it changes this year, fine. Come yell at me later. But the other reason is because you got to just watch the balance of the usage rate is you don't want to allow opponents to key in on RJ too much to the detriment of his other teammates, right? Like, and so having Elliot get up to 20 or slightly above, Jalen Washington getting his rate up to 22, maybe something like that, right? To where you have other guys when opponents are making their scouting report and they're looking at this usage rate, they can see how much a team is relying on it. And if it gets to be too much, makes their job a little bit easier. Now, I also thought, hey, let me check out the numbers on, last year, the big three nationally for National Player of the Year were RJ, obviously Zach Edey, and obviously Dalton Connect. RJ, even though he was pretty high, in the Carolina realm at 27.7%, he was relatively low as compared to Edey and Connect. Edey, his usage rate last year, 33.4%, the only power conference player in the top 10 nationally. Dalton Connect was not that far behind, though. He was 32.7% usage rate for Tennessee. And you know that. I mean, you saw both those teams play. You know how much Tennessee leaned on Connect. Too much at times. You know how much Purdue leaned on Edey. Perhaps too much at times, but it's kind of a different thing for him as a big man in a way, right? Like just because his body is so dominantly different than other people's at the college level. So my ideal for RJ this year is in the 25 to 28% usage rate. As you look at all those other great Carolina teams in the last 10, 15, 20 years, they all had a player that was 25 to 28% usage rate. So I think that's the appropriate amount for RJ. And so, Drew, I think part of my answer to you is to say it's a situation where maybe RJ's counting numbers come down. Maybe we could get his minutes down ever so slightly. But there is a sense in which utilizing him a lot allows more team success for Carolina, which gives him greater notoriety, which, pumps him up in the National Player of the Year conversation and race. There's also the thing of like, he was in that conversation last year, so that's going to help in the voters' eyes this year. There won't be voter fatigue because he didn't win, right? And so that's an interesting thing. Now, as you look back to last year's Carolina team, only RJ and Armando Bacot were over 20%. Now, to be fair, the other three starters, Elliot, Cadeau, Harrison Ingram, Cormac Ryan, were all in the 18 to 19 range. And so I think that's the other thing you're looking at is not only where does RJ's usage sit, but how balanced can you get the other key contributors on this team? You want them in the low 20s, high teens, whatever that may be, so that they are a reliable threat. You look back to the 2022 season, you've got 4 of the Iron 5 in the low to mid 20% usage rate. Leaky was sitting at 8%. That means other teams can just play off of him. And you don't want that. So we're looking for a little more balance. But again, RJ, my hope is that his usage rate is 25 to 28%. And while my gut reaction is that there is a world in which him not being the National Player of the Year could be a good thing, I think it actually would be a good thing that would come with team success. So stamp it. Give me RJ Davis, National Player of the Year. Great question, Drew. Thank you so much. Speaking of that team success, where exactly are the Tar Heels going to land this year in the ACC regular season standings? We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about game time, going to MLB games in the summer is one of my all-time favorite things to do, even though my Braves are terrible right now. The game, the food, the people, everything that's part of the experience, I love it so much. And thankfully, when I want to get tickets to a game, I don't have to sweat high-priced last-minute tickets because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, making tickets, getting them easier and faster. In fact, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to game time. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Carolina at Minnesota, Thursday, August 29th. You guys, 20 days away. It's crazy. It's almost here. That's the season kickoff. Cheapest ticket to get into the game right now on Game Time, $32. There's some flash deals going on right now. You can get into an end zone row 2 for $78 a pop right now. Or if you want to get on the sideline right behind Carolina's bench, row 8 at like the 45-yard line for $101. That is absolutely worth it. Go snag these right now. Get to Minnesota, cheer on the Tar Heels, and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Earlier this week, Terrence Oglesby, not the referee, the college basketball analyst who, does Field of 68. He's actually part of Hornets Live for the Charlotte Hornets, played at Clemson back in the Hansborough era, put out a way too early ACC rankings. This was earlier this week. I know it's early, and I know that T.O. said specifically this is a brainstorming exercise and that it's way too early. So that said, I'm not here to beat this thing up, but it is a fun exercise anytime People are putting out lists like this to say, hey, let's beat this up a little bit. Let's chop it up, see who's too high, who's too low, who's just right. We'll get that Goldilocks porridge going, right? And so here's his predicted order of finish. And that's a critical thing. He made clear to say, this is not a power ranking. This is my brainstorming way too early prediction of the order of finish for the ACC regular season standings. You ready for it? Let me give it to you. We'll start at 1 and go to 18. Number 1, Duke. Number 2, Virginia. 3, Tar Heels. 4, Clemson. 5, Louisville. 6, Miami. 7, NC State. 8, Wake Forest. 9, Pitt. 10, SMU. Interesting. That's the highest new blood. 11, Syracuse. 12, Notre Dame. 13, Stanford. 14, Virginia Tech. 15, Cal. 16, Georgia Tech. 17, BC. And 18, FSU. Woof. 18. Y'all, that is a lot of basketball teams in this conference. Man. Okay, so as you look at this, here's where I'm at. Obviously, we're going to start with the Tar Heels. It's tough to say, boy, you're way too low on Carolina at 3, right? Because it's a top 3 conference finish, and that's a very fair thing to look at. But I just have a hard time, and I know it's an unbalanced schedule without true home and home. I wish we could get back there, man. I love that version of conference play. Anyway, I know that, and I know some team schedules aren't as harder, at least on paper, right? You get into the season, and who knows who's going to be good and who's going to, like, this time last year, I would have laughed in your face if you told me Miami was not going to be good last year, right? But it was true. But I think that Carolina is too low at 3. I just can't look at this thing, look at who Carolina has, look at the mix of talent, and say, these Tar Heels are going to fall outside the top 2. I just don't see it. Like, yes, Duke is going to be a very good basketball team as well. I still think the Tar Heels are better. It's just been proven in this day and age that you cannot very fully rely on freshman talent to win the day consistently across the course of a season. And that's what Duke's going to be doing. I know they have some complementary pieces with talent and experience that are going to help, but Duke's going to be relying on a freshman, albeit an incredibly talented freshman in Cooper Flagg, but it don't matter. So we'll see what happens. But that's my first take is, while it's maybe crazy to say Carolina's too low at 3, they're too low at 3. That's where I'm at. Here, let me give you a couple teams I think are too high. Virginia, 2. T.O., brother, I respect you and I think you're great at this. I just don't see the Cavs at 2. It is hard to bet against Tony Bennett. He's a great basketball coach, and Virginia has proven to be consistent in the ACC. But man, they haven't had it. Their offense has been terrible. And yes, they've brought in a couple guys in the transfer portal. But I mean, they lose Ryan Dunn. They lose, it's like, I don't know. And I just don't see Virginia at 2. Next, Clemson at 4. They could, because they get multiple guys back, right? The chef's back. He's going to cook a little bit. But I just think losing PJ Hall is a big deal. And so I don't think Clemson's going to tank. I think they'll be top half of the ACC, which is top 9 now. Remember when the league used to be 9 teams? Yeah, that's just the top half of it now. I think Clemson finishes top 9, but 4, that's high for me, especially again without PJ Hall back. And then the other one that I think is too high is SMU. And they're 10. But man, there's just coming into the ACC, when you live outside the geographical footprint, you're bringing in a new coach in Andy Enfield, who's coming over from USC. That's the thing that started the whole coaching carousel that wound up with Calipari leaving Kentucky and Mark Pope going to Kentucky. Yes, Enfield's a better coach, but year 1, top 10, nah. Are they going to be in the cellar? Absolutely not. But top 10 is too low. Teams that are too low. Wake Forest at 8. Let's remember, Hunter Salas is coming back for this team. They've got some other talent. They lose some, sure. A Hunter Salas-led team is not going to be 8th in the ACC. Two other teams, very, very low. He's got Georgia Tech at 16. I know they lose some pieces as well. This, to me, is a vote for Damon Stoudemire. I think he's a great coach. I think he's got Georgia Tech playing hard and well. I'm not saying they're going to finish top half, but 16 is too low for me, as is Florida State at 18. Once again, they're not going to be challenging back for the top. I don't think they are that good of a team, but Jameer Watkins, remember, came back to Florida State. Jameer Watkins could be an all-ACC player easily this season. Similar to Hunter Salas. I just think he wills Florida State out of the cellar, maybe to 12 or something like that, but not 18. I don't think so. A couple at just right. Louisville at 5, and this may be hot takey after how bad they've been, but I believe in Pat Kelsey. I think he's a great coach, and I like the pieces they've brought in. I think they've got a lot of talent, and I think Louisville, I'm not going to say they're going to be back, but they're going to be a lot better this year. And the other's Duke. I'm not saying they're just right at 1, but I don't see a world in which Duke falls out of the top 3 in the conference. Just too much talent. I think Carolina bests them, but I don't see Duke getting outside the top 3. As for the newbies, you heard me say SMU's at 10. He's got Stanford at 13, Cal at 15. I think both fall a little more than that. But yeah, I mean, that's outside the top 12. We're in the teens, and so I think that's fair. Also, one last word really quick. Drake May made his debut with the Patriots on Thursday night. He got 1 series. Jacoby Brissett started things off, took the first series. Drake had the second series. He was 2 for 3, 19 yards. So you just don't get to see much. Picked up 1 first down, a 3rd and 12. That's the most Drake May thing ever. But then they couldn't convert a 3rd and 11 after that. That was it. So we'll see moving forward in the preseason what happens. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this week on Locked On Tar Heels. Really appreciate you joining. If you haven't subscribed to the show on video and audio, we'd love to have you do that. If you've not joined us on the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, man, you are missing out. Come join us. It's free. The link's in the show notes. Just click on it. Come on in. Let's talk Tar Heels all the time. It's great. All right, y'all. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Be back with you on Monday. But until then, peace.